some introduction.
Let me start just a little bit. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I really not quite sure why I am in your group here, because I have nothing to do with cybernetics and I don't know anything about it. I am, however, concerned about semantics, if you have anything to do with that, and how the way that we perceive the world is done through the words that we use and how we understand it. It was a semanticist, which you're probably familiar with, Korzybski, who said that the map is not the territory. And the words that we use are the map that we have of the world. We see the world through our language. And if the map is not correct, then we perceive the world incorrectly. So I think we can all agree on that. I don't have anything to do with the sciences that you are all involved in, so I'm not sure why I'm here, except that we're talking about Islam. Now, okay, you're screen sharing now. To talk about Islam, let me mention something first that Jason mentioned, that he talked with two imams and wanted to have them appear also, and that at the last minute they canceled out. Well, I have exactly the same experience, that about 10 years ago, a Muslim whom I became acquainted with, let's put it that way, from Pakistan. We talked about Islam, and then he said he would like to arrange a meeting between me and an imam to talk about Islam, debate or discussion. And we had it all arranged at the Phoenix Library. And 2 weeks before it was scheduled to take place, the imam called him and said, he's just too busy for the foreseeable future. In other words, he backed out. And so this Muslim acquaintance of mine made another arrangement later on with another imam. And exactly the same thing happened. A couple of weeks before it was scheduled to take place, after all of the advertisements had gone out and so on, the imam backed out saying he's just too busy. And the reason is very clear, that these religious Muslims do not want to have a discussion with a knowledgeable non-Muslim about Islam, because they do not want the public to know what Islam is really all about. So, and this is a problem that we continually run into. The last thing that a religious Muslim wants in the West is to talk about the Quran in public, because the Quran is the basis of Islamic religion, and it's fixed. It cannot be reformed. It cannot be changed, because, you know, if you say, can say that anything about all Muslims, it is that they believe that the Quran is the literal word of their God, Allah, that is unchangeable, it's perfect, it's eternal, and is and therefore nobody, no slave of Allah, which is what Muslims consider all people to be, slaves of Allah, no Muslim can ever change, or no human being can ever change anything in the Quran. Therefore, whatever is in the Quran, everybody is stuck with. Muslims are stuck with it, and non-Muslims are stuck with it. And unfortunately, there are many things in the Quran, and we'll see some of them today, which require Muslims to strive to make Islam the dominant religion in the world, whether non-Muslims like it or not. There are many jihadist passages in the Quran, supremacist passages in the Quran. They're there, and nobody can interpret them in a way to make them mean something different from what they obviously look like they mean. I mean, if the Quran, and in fact, Jason, if you want to maybe put it onto page 22.
You're currently seeing page 1, let me confirm, right?
Right, yeah, if you can get it to page 22, we have a bunch of quotations from the Quran. And again, these, and it's not a matter of a bad translation. There's an excellent Muslim website, Muslim religious website, which gives more than 30 different Muslim approved translations into English. And what's interesting about this, there you go, thank you. What's interesting about this is that the translations are almost identical. They were made at different times by different people, by scholars, Muslim scholars, who understand both English and classical Arabic. and they come out to almost the same, if it's not exactly the same words, it's perhaps the same meaning. Let me give you one example. Look at number 5, which is on your screen now. Attitude towards non-Muslims. Verse 98.6 says, the unbelievers among the people of the people of the book. By the way, people of the book is an expression that the Quran uses to refer to Jews and Christians. And so here it says, the unbelievers among the people of the book and the pagans shall burn forever in the fire of hell. They are the vilest of creatures. Another very similar verse, 855, that's number 6, right below that. The vilest of animals in Allah's sight are those who disbelieve. If you look at other translations, they will say something like the worst of created beings, the worst of creatures, the lowest of animals, the lowest of creatures. In other words, it's a way of saying that Allah considers unbelievers to be subhuman. Now, you look at these verses, there's nothing you could do about them. There's no interpretation of them that you could possibly come up with that will make these verses seem like Allah respects unbelievers and considers them to be equal human beings with other human beings and with Muslims. There's no way to do that. I've never seen it. I've never seen any Muslim come up with an interpretation. Now, some Muslims, when they talk to non-Muslims, will say, oh, well, this was written in the 7th century and it doesn't refer to modern day. And they will say this about other verses of the Quran. But they will say that only to non-Muslims. They will never say that to Muslim believers because they know that that would be blasphemy. And for a Muslim to commit blasphemy means that they are committing apostasy. Why? Because it violates the fundamental principle of Islam that Allah's words are eternal, eternally valid. If you say that they're historically conditioned, you're saying that some human beings determine that Allah's words are no longer valid, and that makes you an apostate. And so it cannot be. There was a case many years ago, I remember, in Gaza. There was a Quran teacher who was trying to tell his university students that many of these verses in the Quran are historically conditioned and therefore not valid anymore for today. So he was a progressive. His students threw him out of the 2nd-story window and killed him because they understand that this teacher was committing apostasy. And the penalty for apostasy in Islam is death, excuse me, according to Sharia law. This is the problem we are up against.
May I ask a question or make a remark?
Absolutely.
Because let's say, before the Reformation or even after the Reformation, Roman Catholics and Protestants also talked of each other in this lingo and also burned each other at the stake and things like that. It was common in the 15th century or in the 16th century. So is it not a problem of religion more than of Islam specifically?
I'm glad you asked that question. Many people, including some Reformed Muslims, and perhaps Akol himself, I'm not sure, but other Reformed Muslims, like to point to the Reformation to say that, well, Islam has to undergo Reformation like Christianity did. But if you look closely, you will see that Christianity did not undergo a Reformation. There was no Christian Reformation. It was a Protestant Reformation, which is the correct term. And what it was a revolt against the Catholic Church, the political power of the Catholic Church, which put the sacred texts of Christianity into the hands of the believers. That was the whole idea. And right after Martin Luther, excuse me, right after Martin Luther, some people began to publish translations of the Gospels so that the Christians could actually read them. Because it was on the proscription list of the Catholic Church. In fact, until the 1950s, Catholics were not allowed to read the Bible. But that's the Catholic Church.
For example,
so to get to, let me just say
something. The Czech Jan Hus, he had translated the Bible, and then he was burned at the stake for that.
That's right, exactly the point. But that was the Catholic Church. So the Reformation was a Protestant Reformation, which was essentially a reversion back to the Gospels, to the sacred texts. In Islam, you have exactly the opposite problem, because the Islamic sacred texts are the source of the problem, not some hierarchical structure like the Catholic Church. There is no such structure in Islam. There's something vaguely similar in Shiite Islam, but that's not the point. The point here is the texts themselves. In the Gospels are the basis of Christianity, and the Quran is the basis of Islam, and the Gospels are basically peaceful. There is nothing in the Gospels which tell Christians that they must go out and make war against unbelievers. Their precept in Christianity is go forth and preach the gospel to every living creature. That's what it says. In Islam, quite the contrary, and you can see this on the page that Jason is showing from these collection of verses. The precept in Islam, the commands in Islam are to make war against non-Muslims until Islam reigns supreme in the world. This is the problem with Islam, basically, in a nutshell. And the question is what to do about that. Jamie?
Yeah, may I comment? But I think that this may be slightly misleading, because I think there were different versions of the text, and basically they were all deleted. The Gospels, there was a possibility for 4 Gospels, but there were actually different.
Oh, you're cutting out. We can't hear you.
Jamie,
your microphone is cut out.
Oh, sorry. So I
Say it again.
okay, what I was trying to say, that this the way you describe the Roman Catholic Church, how they separated themselves from the Eastern Orthodox, and that is a structure that was used, and we need to keep it separate from the text. That the same argument can be made about Islam, but they destroyed all the text that didn't fit with the version of some imperial thinking imam who wanted to turn it into a tool to dominate the world. But actually we don't really know what the original texts are, because or the ways that people were interacting with that text. So I'm willing to accept that Mohammed maybe did some things that are not kosher, but to kind of say that the whole belief system can be thrown out of the window, and that there is no morality in it. Okay, I'll rest my case for now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, Jamie. But first of all, in the Islamic world, there is a unified text of the Quran that everybody accepts. We're not here to talk about Christianity and the Gospels, but so I really think that we would not want to do that.
But there are the Shias and the Sunnis, and they're at war with one another, and now we have the Salafis and we have the Sufis. So there is a whole variety of things that they're killing each other. So it's not like that there is agreement about the unified meaning of the text.
Jamie, excuse me. We're talking about the Quran, and the Shias accept the same Quran that the Sunnis do. So the Quran is not at issue among Muslims. It's all the same. And that's why we cannot use that argument. Yeah, the Shiites and the Sunnis are at each other's throats, and they have been for 1400 years just about. But that doesn't mean that they disagree about jihad and the necessity for Islam to take over the world. And in fact, let me give you from their own texts. You've got the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I rather doubt that anyone in this group, except for me, has actually read that. But it's important because the Islamic Republic of Iran is Shiite. Let me read you just a couple of sentences from their preamble to their constitution, where they call it an ideological army. It says, in the formation and equipping of the country's defense forces, due attention must be paid to the faith and ideology as the basic criteria. Accordingly, The Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps are to be organized in conformity with this goal, and they will be responsible not only for guarding and preserving the frontiers of the country, but for fulfilling the ideological mission of jihad in God's way. That is, extending the sovereignty of God's law, that is Sharia, throughout the world. And he says, this is in accordance with the Quranic verse, prepare against them, that is non-Muslims, whatever force you are able to muster, and strings of horses, striking fear into the enemy of God and your enemy and others beside them. That's Quran 860. Now, what is interesting here, in addition to them publicly saying that they're going to use their armed forces in order to spread Islam, and not only for defense, they're citing a verse from the Quran, 860, which is exactly the same verse that the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood refers to in its emblem. And so there is no difference between Sunnis and Shiites when it comes to the Muslim goal of jihad and making Islam supreme in the world. That is the important point for us non-Muslims to realize. The Sunnis and the Shiites will disagree over family law, for example, and they'll disagree over the role of imams in Sunni Islam, for example. The imams are considered somewhat closer to Allah than other human beings. In Sunni Islam, this is anathema. In Sunni Islam, all human beings are equally slaves of Allah. But these things don't concern us. We're concerned.
I don't think we should go on like this. I mean, we are in the middle of a war, and this is more or less Israeli backing propaganda, in the sense that in this context, because
how can you say that the Quran is Israeli propaganda? I don't understand that.
No. I mean, the problem of this war, which is in the background, is also the Israeli occupation. We know.
You're not speaking like a cybernetist here. You're speaking like an anti-Israeli propagandist, which is very different.
What I wanted to say is that this is not. This whole conflict is so loaded with all kinds of social texts, and this is one of those social texts. That the Islamists.
Carl, could you share that Iran documentation at least with me? So
yes, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Yes, that is on page 19.
Page 19.
Talking about Islam here and the fact that Islam is fundamentally different from other religions in the fact that, first of all, Sharia law covers all aspects of life. It's essentially totalitarian. And also because there is this element of imperialism, which you have in Islam that you don't have in other religions, namely that you have the goal, which if you go back to the Quran again, and everything in Islam ultimately goes back to the Quran, because again, Muslims believe that this is the literal word of their God, which they are required to follow. So back on page 22, if you, Jason, if you'd be so kind, go back to page 22, up at the top.
Okay.
There's a couple of verses regarding Islamic supremacism. Look at number 4, which is verse 61:9. It says, "He who has sent his messenger with guidance and religion of truth," that's Islam, of course, "to make it victorious over all religion, even though the infidels may resist." This is just one of the supremacist passages in the Quran, which religious Muslims take seriously. Now, we may not like it, and Lot doesn't want to talk about this, but for Muslims, this is the fundamental issue, how the Quran influences the lives of Muslims, and Muslims in any society which is controlled by the religious Muslims, for example, any society controlled by Al-Qaeda or even the Islamic Republic of Iran, Saudi Arabia, at least until very recently, ISIS, the Islamic Republic, you've got the Islamic groups in Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Boko Haram in Nigeria and elsewhere. Wherever these people have political power, they will kill Muslims who disagree with the Quran. If a Muslim gets up and say, well, I reject this passage in the Quran, they will be killed under Sharia law, because that's what Sharia law requires them to do. So we have an enormous conflict within the world of Islam between the religious establishment and those Muslims who are essentially fed up with Islam and would like to change Islam. Like Akol, who was supposed to be here, I think he's a good person. He has a Western conscience, but he has a Muslim identity, and the two are in conflict with one another. You know, there's a moderate Muslim in the United States by the name of Zuhdi Jasser. I've debated with him in public. It's on video also, as a matter of fact. And he wrote his autobiography called Battle for the Soul of Islam. In fact, it should be titled Battle for the Soul of Zuhdi Jasser, because he, like other moderate Muslims, are fighting an irreconcilable conflict between his religion and his conscience.
Carl,
there is no way
I'd
out.
like to
He has a
interrupt here
Western
for just a
conscience.
moment.
He has a Western
Could I interrupt
conscience,
you, Carl?
and the Western conscience is in conflict with the Quran. There is no way to reconcile it.
Carl, could I interrupt you for just a minute?
Go ahead,
With
please.
a very precise comment, and that is the notion that somehow human identity is associated with religious identity. I think when you say the Islamic identity, you are really abusing the language and causing conflicts that are not necessary.
Well, the Islamic identity means to the extent to which they identify with the Quran as their sacred text and the commandment from their God as how to behave. I don't think that's abusing anything. That's what the word means. Islamic refers to the religion. Muslim refers to the scientific.
I'm talking about the scientific meaning of the word identity.
Well, the way people think of themselves, they identify.
No, it's something that goes beyond the individual self. It's a way to distinguish X from Y, to distinguish the moon from the sun.
Well, here they distinguish Muslims from non-Muslims. That's their distinguishing factor. I don't think there's any problem with that. I mean, the word certainly means something. The whole idea of Islam is to distinguish Muslims from non-Muslims. That runs through the Quran like a red thread. And you will find many.
But I would like to, could you maybe comment on Sufism? Because you haven't said anything about that. Where do they fit in?
About Sufism?
Sufism, yeah.
Well, the reason I haven't so far is that it does not affect the problem that we are having with Islam. The Sufis are not in control of the Muslim supremacist movement, first of all. And second of all, they don't have any doctrine that is different from the rest. The Sufis can be either Shiite or Sunni. The Sufi is a more mystical way of practicing the religion, but their doctrine is the same. They just don't focus much on the doctrine. They focus more on the mystic spiritual feelings, which is different. But they don't affect us, again, because they are not influential in the Muslim world as far as we're concerned. They don't control the Islamic Republic of Iran. They don't control the Muslim Brotherhood. And so they don't really have much effect on the real world that we are concerned with.
I agree with you that there's a problem here. And also that it is very much in contrast, for example, against what Christ says himself when he at the mountain speech says that all kinds of things which are meant to be for humanity, not only for the Jewish people, and that it is outgoing and that it is loving and caring. I agree with that. We have that type of tradition. I myself am not religious at all, but I agree that we are confronted with a problem. But where do we go from there?
Well, that's a good question. Where do we go from there? Well, the question that I raise all the time, what do we do about the Islamic threat? And there is an Islamic threat. Certainly, if you're in Europe, you should be aware of this because
Sure.
Islam gradually is actually taking over Europe. You may not want to agree with it, but you know, about 12 years ago,
In Europe, we have the problem that this is an electoral issue which is at the extreme right.
well, not really. It's an Islamic issue. In 2006, 15 years ago, when Gaddafi was still alive, he said, we have 50 million Muslims in Europe. We, that is Muslims. There are signs that Allah will grant Islam victory in Europe without swords, without guns, without conquest. We will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades. That is not right-wing propaganda. That is a leading Muslim leader talking. So there is a problem there. Excuse me one second. We know from public opinion surveys that roughly 2/3 of the Muslim immigrants in Europe want Sharia law. That's also an empirical data. Yes, Jamie. Jamie?
Well,
Or Jason?
you're cutting off again.
Carl, I'll wait till the end of your talk. My comment.
Okay. So I think we really should concentrate on the Quran. If you have not read the Quran, I urge you to do it because that is the be all and end all of Islam as a religion. And the religious community in Islam, that is all of the mosques and the Islamic Republic of Iran with their ayatollahs, they take all of these Quran verses very, very seriously. So if you want to know what motivates them, read the Quran, because they read the Quran and they act upon it. That is why they do what they do, and that's why it is a threat to the non-Muslim world as well as to Muslims. By the way, Muslims as people are the first victims of Islam because Islam considers them all to be slaves of Allah who must follow the Quran and must follow Sharia law. In other words, Islam takes away their freedom. And so Muslims themselves are the first people to lose their freedom. And of course, after that.
Sorry. If it's all right, Carl, can I make a comment?
Please, of course.
Okay, so I 100% second Lute's suggestion that we say this is about religion and not about Islam. Because
wait, excuse me a second. Islam is the religion.
No, but Lute said we talk as if Islam is different from the other religions, and
yes,
it's not true. And now let me make the argument, because as you yourself point out, there is a text, and then there are some power structures who decide what the text should mean, that it should be literal. And every monotheistic religion has that same problem, that there is a power structure who decides what the text means and what needs to be done to execute the text. And then they find a way to ostracize the people who disagree. So what we're actually talking about now is brainwashing, and you don't need any religion to do brainwashing. Anyone can do it. You have a power structure, you make a certain text holy, and then you start manipulating people and use all the signs that we know about how the human mind works, and you manipulate them. And that has been going on with Christianity. That has been going on, I mean, at the moment, the Mormons, or I don't know how they're called, the followers of Jehovah, they're doing exactly the same thing with their version of the text. So it's any monotheistic religion that creates that problem in saying it's my God and all your gods are the wrong ones. And that is where we need to go, like, where did that idea start? What are the mutations of that idea, and how can we get out of it, get underneath of it, because that's what's destroying us, because we're all fighting about which God is superior to which other God.
If I may return to your point about whether Islam is different from other religions, I would like to quote to you the leading Islamic religious authority in the world today. I don't know whether you have ever heard of him. It's called Yusuf Qaradawi. He is 93 years old. He's written about 100 books on Islam. He is the most respected Islamic religious authority in the world today. He was born in Egypt. He was exiled from Egypt under Mubarak and living in Qatar. And after Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood took control of Egypt in 2012, he was invited back. He came to speak at the Tahrir Square in Cairo. He had 1 million people turn out to listen to him. I'm not sure that anybody on this thread today can get anywhere near that number of people to come to listen to us, but he did. What did he say? He said, quote, "Islam is not a religion in the common distorted meaning of the word, confining its scope only to the private life of man. By saying that it is a complete way of life, is Islam, we mean that it caters for all the fields of human existence. In fact, Islam provides guidance for all walks of life, individual and social, material and moral, economic and political, legal and cultural, national and international." Here is another quotation from a Muslim scholar. "Islam is a religion, but not in the Western meaning of religion. The Western connotation of the term religion is something between the believer and God. Islam as a religion organizes all aspects of life on both the individual and national levels. Islam organizes your relations with God, with yourself, with your children, with your relatives, with your neighbor, with your guest, and with other brethren. Islam clearly establishes your duties and rights in all those relationships. Islam establishes a clear system of worship, civil rights, laws of marriage and divorce, laws of inheritance, code of behavior, what not to drink, what to wear, what not to wear, how to worship God, how to govern, the laws of war and peace, when to go to war, when to make peace, the laws of economics, and the laws of buying and selling. Islam is a complete code of life." They are the ones who use the term Islam, and they are telling us what Islam is all about. There's another Islamic website, which first part is headed, "Islam is a complete way of life, Islam as an ideology." And it says, in sharp contrast to Christianity, Judaism, and other religions, Islam is not merely a religion. Rather, Islam is a unique and comprehensive ideology. And it goes on in that vein. So we see that religious Muslims, and not just some hierarchy, but this is spread out throughout the Muslim world, because there is no hierarchy in Islam. There is no equivalent to the Catholic Church, which can say you must do this or you must do that. Everything goes back to the Quran, and it's the Muslims individually and the religious Muslims all seem to come to the conclusion that that the Quran is supremacist, that the goal of Islam is to create a worldwide Islamic empire called the Caliphate. They tell us that. I'm not sure it's really appropriate for us to tell Muslims what their religion is all about. They tell us that. So when I give you all of these quotations, it's not my opinion. Those are the Islamic religious texts, the sacred texts. Those are the Islamic religious authorities who have millions and hundreds of millions of people who respect them for what they're saying about Islam. They are telling us that. I think it's ludicrous for us to sit and say, well, they're wrong about their own religion. It doesn't make any sense.
It's
Okay,
more than a million, it's a billion.
Okay,
It's
Carl,
1.3 billion.
Carl, this gets back to what Jerry Chandler said about identity and how we use that term whether in a scientific way or in some ambiguous way that creates confusion. And so the first identity problem that I see is
You muted yourself again. We can't hear you.
yes. Jerry Chandler pointing out the question of identity, and that one should be very careful, especially when we say A is equal to B. And so what I see happening here is that you say there is a text, and then you say what people are thinking is identical to the text, and so every Muslim becomes identical to the Quran.
I didn't say that.
No, but that is what you're saying, because
No, I'm sorry, Jamie, that is not what I'm saying.
No, but I hear you confusing, or not confusing. I hear you switching back and forth. There is a text, and it's obvious what the text means because everyone's agreeing. They're 100% in agreement, and then so you all put them in the one identity of 100% agreement. While what I'm trying to do is say there is a text, and under the people, and we need to keep the two separate.
I agree with you. I always, in fact, in all of my lectures, I always begin by separating the concepts of Islam and Muslims. Islam is the religion based on the Quran. Muslims are people who may or may not follow the religion or who follow it to various degrees.